China did not begin as an aviation superpower. There was no legendary aircraft, no advanced technology, no global respect. In fact, for decades, Chinese military aircraft were mocked, called copies, called outdated, called unreliable. But today, China flies stealth fighters, builds strategic bombers, and challenges American air dominance. So how did China go from copying foreign aircraft to building its own modern air force? This is the complete story. Every major Chinese military aircraft ever made. China's aviation story began after 1949. The newly formed People's Republic of China had no aircraft industry. Its survival depended on one thing: the Soviet Union. The first Chinese military aircraft were not Chinese at all. They were Soviet designs built under license, factories were constructed, engineers were trained, and copying became the foundation. China's earliest jet fighters were based on Soviet models, rebadged with Chinese names, but powered by foreign technology. During the Korean War era, these aircraft formed the backbone of China's air defense. They were simple, they were rugged, and most importantly, they could be mass-produced, but innovation was still far away. As relations with the Soviet Union collapsed, China was suddenly alone. No spare parts, no new blueprints, new support. So China did what it would become famous for. It reverse engineered everything. Old Soviet fighters were copied piece by piece. Bombers were stretched, modified, and rebuilt. Trainee aircraft were redesigned into combat roles. Some aircraft entered service decades after their original designs. Others were upgraded again and again to stay relevant. During this period, China focused on quantity over quality. The goal was simple: defend Chinese airspace at any cost. These aircraft were not advanced, but they kept China in the air. China understood one thing clearly: fighters alone were not enough. Strategic bombing capability was essential. Using older Soviet bomber concepts, China developed long-range bombers designed to strike regional targets. These aircraft became symbols of Chinese air power. They were large, they were loud, they were outdated, but they could fly far and they could carry heavy payloads. Even today, some of these bombers, modernized and upgraded, are still flying. Proof that China values endurance over replacement. The 1980s changed everything. China briefly opened its doors to the West. Western avionics, radar systems, and design philosophy began influencing Chinese aircraft. For the first time, Chinese engineers were not just copying, they were learning. New fighters appeared with blended designs. Older aircraft received modern electronics. Training jets became advanced platforms. But this progress was interrupted. After geopolitical tensions rose again, China was cut off. Once more, China had to stand alone. China turned to Russia. Modern Russian fighters were purchased, not just to fly but to study. China examined the engines, airframes, and flight characteristics. Soon after, Chinese versions began to appear. Some were licensed, some were locally modified, some were controversial. But one thing was clear: China was catching up fast. Fourth-generation fighters entered service. Multi-role aircraft became common. Air superiority was no longer a dream. Then came the moment the world stopped laughing. China unveiled stealth aircraft. Angular designs, internal weapon bays, radar-evading shapes. For the first time, China was not following, it was competing. Stealth fighters entered active service. Advanced trainers followed. Unmanned combat drones filled the skies. China's Air Force transformed from defensive to offensive, from regional to global. Modern warfare is not just fighters. China invested heavily in transport aircraft, aerial refueling platforms, early warning aircraft, surveillance planes, combat drones. These aircraft multiplied the effectiveness of every fighter in the sky. China could now project power far beyond its borders. Today, China operates stealth fighters, long-range bombers, advanced trainers, hypersonic test platforms, massive drone fleets. Some aircraft are entirely indigenous, others still show foreign influence. But the era of simple copying is over. China now designs, tests, and produces one of the largest air forces on Earth. China's military aircraft history is not a story of perfection. It is a story of persistence. From copying Soviet jets to flying stealth fighters, China built its air force step by step, mistake by mistake, upgrade by upgrade, and the next generation may already be flying unseen.